How often do we consider sharks' majesty beyond the sensationalism of rare attacks? While shark encounters evoke fear and fascination, could these incidents stem more from curiosity than aggression? By understanding sharks' behavior, we can learn to appreciate and coexist with them peacefully. Here are 6 captivating stories that reveal the true nature of these magnificent creatures. It was the summer of 2001. And the golden rays of the sun soaked the Pacific Ocean off the rugged Monterey coastline in California. This shore had always been a haven for wildlife and romantics, but concealed beneath its waves lay one of the most dreaded creatures, man's arch nemesis, the great white shark. Tom Anderson, in his early 40s, was an experienced kayaker. He had invested countless weekends in testing these waters of paradise. Pushing off the sandy beach with a sturdy kayak and a heart full of adventure, he felt invincible. Weighing around 300 pounds, Tom was a large man in a kayak, but he habitually underestimated the temperamental sea. Tom paddled farther offshore and the scenery enchanted him. The rhythmic sound of waves against the kayak did much to soothe his mind, which drifted quickly into thoughts of playful dolphins and sea otters, which often accompanied him. Under this tranquility, however, lay an intuitive awareness that the ocean could be hostile immediately. The morning wore on into the afternoon. The sun was higher. Heaving the water onto a mass of shining diamonds, Tom paddled further into the sea with rising confidence. He had heard that great whites were spotted in the area but dismissed it as gossip, just folklore to freak out the tourists. He was caught up in the moment and blind to the vibrant world beneath his surface. Fish darted about, flickering like knives in the sun's rays, while seals gambled at play around rocky outcrops, unaware of the killer below. But Tom did not realize that he had strayed into the territory of a giant great white shark, over 2,000 pounds and more than 15 feet long, an incredible hunter. This mature female shark had been fooled by the bright color of Tom's kayak, thinking it was a seal. She surged up from below with horrifying upward speed. One moment the water was flat, the next it bulged ominously beneath him. Before he could turn his head to see what was happening, the great white launched out of the water, jaws wide open, aiming directly at his kayak. In this sudden attack, he capsized instantly. The surge in adrenaline, the flailing to regain footing in cold water, set him in a state of panic. Though he had trained for emergencies, nothing could prepare him for the raw terror of looking upon a great white in its domain. He struggled to keep his head above the waves, gasping for breath as he scoured the depths for any sign of the predator. Off in the distance, the commercial fishing boat Sea Wanderer was working on an average day. At the same time, its crew members lazed around in the afternoon to witness a dramatic turn of events. Tom's capsized kayak and the dark silhouette of the great white swimming beneath the surface. Jack Thompson, the burly Sea Wanderer captain, bellowed commands to prepare for a rescue. As Tom thrashed in the water, he saw the shark's dorsal fin slicing through the surface. He was vulnerable, a little human in an immense ocean. His instinct told him to swim to his overturned kayak, hoping for safety. But the shark had other ideas. Hands raced against time as the crew aboard the Sea Wanderer worked feverishly to get closer. Jack didn't take his eyes off the water. Every second counted. They could see Tom struggling, getting weaker by the second. A shark was circling, its powerful body slicing effortlessly through the water with predatory grace. Tom's mind began to race. He thought about his family, kayaking trips with his kids, and the joy of discovering the ocean with them. The realization he may not make it back lit a fierce determination within him to survive. His heart raced, and then he was swimming toward the capsized kayak, praying to God that he'd get there before the shark hit again. The ocean boomed around him, a cacophony of fear and desperation. Each stroke seemed a mountain to overcome, but on the pressed, hoping against hope that the fishing boat would come in time. The moment he touched the kayak, the shark burst out of the depths, jaws snapping inches from his leg. He screamed, the sound deadened by the crashing waves. He could tell how genuinely overpowering the predator's size was. Jack and his crew arrived just in time. They threw a life ring into the sea, shouting for Tom to grab it. Amidst the chaos, Tom struggled to think clearly as he sensed the shark circling closer and closer. The last strength belonged to Tom, who reached for the life ring and pulled toward the boat. The shark hadn't given up yet. It came at him, jaws wide open. As Jack yelled at the crew to turn the ship in closer, it was too late. Tom felt the water churning around him as the shark made its lethal attack. In an instant, the world washed into chaos and darkness. On Sea Wanderer, the crew watched as the great white sank beneath the waves, leaving ripples where Tom had been. Despite their efforts, it was obvious that help had arrived too late. The shark had devoured Tom, and they could not trace his body. News reached the media and his family that Tom died in a shark attack, and that there was nothing much that could be done at the moment. Tom's tragic story resonated over Monterey, a vivid personality lost deep in the ocean. The family could only hang on to some great memories, teaching them how to respect the beauty and danger posed by the sea. His fate became such a vital lesson on the forces of nature. So the moment something like this happens, it alerts kayakers and ocean enthusiasts alike. A New Zealand-based research team set off from its rugged coastline in 2013 for an ambitious oceanic expedition led by dedicated marine biologist Dr. Elena Thompson, deep-sea ecosystem specialist Dr. Marcus Chen, and underwater photographer Sarah Mitchell. They aimed to explore a newly discovered underwater cavern off Fiordland National Park, a region rich in biodiversity steeped in Maori legend. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation as they prepared aboard the research vessel. The ocean, deceptively calm under the midday sun, promised wonders and dangers in equal measure. After reviewing their dive plans, the team donned their gear and slipped into the water, gradually descending into the depths. The light faded to shadows and temperatures dropped as they went deeper. An enormous underwater chamber opened before them as they swam towards the entrance. Colorful corals were burning like a fire on the walls with surreal shapes. Dr. Chen was babbling on about the different species, and Sarah clicked away in the digital memory of this magnificent scene. Laughter and excitement echoed as renewed vigor pumped them to explore this alien land further. The atmosphere began changing as they pressed further into the cavern. The water was becoming darker, and the silence was unnerving. Dr. Thompson felt a shiver down her spine as she tried shaking this uneasiness off. They had been seasoned researchers and knew how the deep sea could sometimes behave. All tranquility shattered in an instant. Next to them, a giant shadow appeared, and up from the depths emerged a giant squid whose tentacles flailed at them like vines from hell. Panic surged as one of its limbs wrapped around Marcus, drawing him into the abyss. In reality, the sighting of this mythic beast was so horrifying that desperation set in. Sarah and Elena shouted frantic orders over their hydrophones as Marcus struggled futilely against its grip. The creature's whirling waters and dimensions made determining how to rescue him impossible. Elena weighed their options. A direct attempt to save Marcus risked angering the beast further, and retreating meant abandoning him. In one bold move, Sarah swam out to Marcus, grasping at the knife sheathed against her thigh. Just as she approached him, though, the other tentacles of the squid became hostile, swirling at her from everywhere. Elena frantically signaled for her to back away. Amid the urgency, her judgment was out of focus. Just then, the squid released Marcus, and he spiraled upward, breaking the surface and gasping for air, disoriented but alive. Elena and Sarah swam hard toward him, but the squid hit back, lashing out with flailing tentacles. In the mayhem, Elena made a split-second decision to retreat. They kicked towards the surface, the darkness closing in on them as the creature chased. Finally, they broke the water's surface, shouting to their crew aboard the vessel. The team hurried to winch them up, relieved to escape the octopus clinging to them. Shaken but unharmed, Marcus recounted his terrifying ordeal while Sarah's heart raced, her mind still processing the experience. As they sailed back toward land, it hit them that it had happened. They were researchers, not adventurers, and their discovery had become a struggle for survival. Back on the mainland, they would debrief, sharing stories that deepened their bond. Weeks later, they published their findings, reflecting on the giant squid. Their expedition had turned into a lesson in humility, the unpredictable nature of nature. Dr. Thompson, Marcus, and Sarah came out not as researchers, but as witnesses to the ocean's mysteries, changed forever by encountering one of its most elusive predators. It was a sunny afternoon in 2013, with flat, calm waters off Vancouver Island in Canada, as the whale-watching boat, the Ocean Explorer, prepared to leave bustling Victoria Harbor. The ship was filled with tourist passengers looking forward to witnessing orcas jumping clear out of the water. Wesley Green was a teacher at a high school who had flown in from Toronto. Yvonne and Christopher Blake were there to celebrate their anniversary, and there was a family of 4 from Los Angeles. As the journey was underway, Captain Jonathan Mackenzie regaled them with tales about local pods of orcas and what they might see. They soon reached the area marked on the map for whale watching, and the crew began to sweep the horizon for signs of their quarry. The cry went up as a small pod of killer whales broke the surface, their black and white bodies glinting smoothly through the water. Wesley was over the moon. This was his dream. Unknown to them, a male killer whale known by researchers as Rogue had broken off from his social group. Rogue, known for his aggressive behavior against boats, lurked unseen and powerful beneath the surface. As the tourists gazed at the playful orcas, Rogue silently approached the Ocean Explorer before ramming the side with great force. The tourists were flung about the vessel, gasping in disbelief as a few lost their balance and fell into the icy ocean. Wesley held fast to the rail as Yvonne and Christopher were slingshotted over the edge, their faces changing from merriment to shocked horror. Pandemonium broke out on the boat as the crew hurried to give the stranded swimmers buoys and life rings. Rogue cruised around the boat, his dorsal fin cutting through the water with all the grace of a knife as the fallen tourists kicked and splashed, crying out for help. Captain Mackenzie was in a dilemma about how to get the passengers aboard without angering the orca. Wesley's pulse raced as he viewed Mia, a young crew member who expertly tossed the life rings into the water, her focus unwavering. Over this time, the turbulent waves held Yvonne and Christopher together in panic as Rogue edged closer toward their cries. Mackenzie yelled to Mia to get up a rescue buoy, then instructed the other passengers to remain completely still as any sudden movement would further irritate Rogue. The boat drifted closer, and for a moment it seemed as though Rogue had hesitated regarding what was occurring. The time seemed to drag painfully while Wesley watched, helpless, as Christopher clung to a life ring and drifted further away. As a last hope, Wesley begged Mia to make noise so that Rogue would turn attention away from the couple. She nodded firmly and started splashing the water, yelling loudly for the orca. As Rogue turned toward the noise with gasps of bated breath, Christopher grasped Yvonne, who now was within his reach. The crew, in a renewed sense of hope, threw more life rings into the water. Christopher finally got one around Yvonne's waist, and they were returning to the boat by swimming. Just when they were starting to reach safety, Rogue's form loomed over them, the reminder of danger still present. The crew pulled Christopher up to the side of the boat, then Yvonne. The passengers cheered as relief washed over them, and Rogue swam nicely a few feet away, a tangible reminder of nature's unpredictability. Back at the dock, Captain Mackenzie spoke to shaken passengers about respect for the sea and its creatures. The tourists felt fear and gratitude as they turned their minds to that day's events, just how fragile life and nature were. This incident was rapidly passed into local legend. It entrenched itself within them all as a story of adventure and survival that had left its lesson in the beauty of the wild and its possible dangers. A story was waiting to unfold in the remote mangroves of northern Australia, specifically near the coastal town of Weipa. It was the year 2002, a time when fishing was more than just a hobby for many local men. It was a way of life. The vast, tangled mangroves, dense foliage, and labyrinthine waterways were home to various wildlife, including the formidable saltwater crocodile, an apex predator that ruled these waters. Weipa, known for its bauxite mining and fishing opportunities, has a rich history. On a warm, humid morning, 2 fishermen, Jackson Jack Mitchell and Michael Mick Thompson, set out in their small, battered boat. Jack, a rugged man with years of fishing experience, and Mick, slightly younger and less seasoned but eager to learn, had been friends since childhood. They often spent weekends fishing, hoping to bring home a big catch to share with their families. As they navigated the winding waterways, the sunlight filtered through the thick canopy overhead, casting playful shadows on the water's surface. The air was thick with the scent of salt and mangrove, mixed with the faint sound of cicadas buzzing in the background. Jack expertly maneuvered the boat while Mick prepared the fishing gear, his mind racing about the bounty that awaited them. They reached a secluded spot known only to a few local fishermen, where the water was deep and the fish plentiful. As they cast their nets, the two men shared stories of past fishing trips, laughter echoing through the stillness. Their camaraderie was palpable, a bond forged through shared experiences and a love for the sea. However, beneath the surface, danger lurked. Over 15 feet long, a massive saltwater crocodile lay in wait among the mangroves. It had been stalking the fishermen for hours, its powerful body moving silently through the water, blending perfectly with the murky depths. The crocodile was hungry, having not eaten for days, and the sight of the small boat filled it with a predatory excitement. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting a golden hue over the landscape, Jack and Mick continued to fish, oblivious to the threat that circled them. The crocodile, with its keen senses, observed the men closely, calculating its attack. It was a patient hunter, knowing that a moment of carelessness would present an opportunity. Without warning, the tranquil scene shattered. The crocodile lunged from the water, its massive jaws snapping shut with a thunderous roar. The impact sent waves crashing against the side of the boat, which tipped violently. Jack and Mick were thrown into the water, the coolness of the river contrasting sharply with the shock of the sudden attack. Jack surfaced, gasping for breath, but before he could comprehend the situation, the crocodile had already seized him. Its powerful jaws clamped around Jack's torso, dragging him beneath the surface. Panic flooded Mick's mind as he watched his friend disappear into the depths, a horrifying realization dawning on him. Instinct kicked in. Mick began to swim, desperately trying to reach Jack, but the murky water obscured his view. He could only see shadows moving beneath him. In a split second, he made a choice. Survival was paramount. He turned his attention to the mangrove trees lining the shore, their thick roots jutting out like fingers beckoning him to safety. Mick swam frantically towards the nearest tree, his heart pounding. He reached the trunk, grabbing hold of a low-hanging branch. He pulled himself up with adrenaline, scrambling onto the sturdy roots that formed a natural ladder. He clung to the tree, looking down at the water, dread pooling in his stomach. The crocodile resurfaced, its eyes scanning for any sign of movement. From his perch in the mangrove, Mick felt a rush of helplessness. He could hear the splashing and distant echoes of the crocodile's growls. Jack was gone, and the realization hit him like a brick. He needed to signal for help, but the remote location made it unlikely anyone would hear them. Desperation mixed with a flicker of hope as he scanned the horizon for any sign of passing boats. His mind raced with ideas. He remembered the flare gun they had packed, a safety precaution for emergencies. It was partially submerged in the boat, which now capsized in the water. The thought of leaving his precarious position made him hesitate, but he knew he had to try. He could lose his chance to save Jack if he didn't act fast. Mick took a deep breath, steadied himself, and climbed down the tree, his heart racing as he approached the water's edge. The crocodile was still circling, its massive body gliding silently through the murky depths, waiting for another opportunity. Mick kept low, praying the predator wouldn't notice him. He reached the boat, which was now a twisted wreck. The fishing gear floated around him like discarded toys. With trembling hands, he reached for the flare gun, his heart pounding as he sensed the crocodile nearby. He saw its dark shape moving beneath the surface, its eyes glinting in the sunlight. Mick fumbled with the flare gun, his fingers slick with sweat. He finally managed to pull it from the wreckage, his eyes darting nervously between the boat and the water. The crocodile was close now, and he could feel the water stirring around him. Time was running out. He aimed, shaking his hands, and fired the flare into the sky. The bright red light shot upward, illuminating the sky and contrasting starkly against the blue. The loud bang echoed through the mangroves, and for a moment, everything was still. Mick watched the flare arc overhead, a beacon of hope against the overwhelming despair. The flare's light flickered, and Mick's heart sank as he realized it wouldn't last long. He needed to climb back up the tree, but the crocodile was still circling, its presence a constant reminder of the danger below. It was a game of patience, and he was still determining if he could win. As the flare began to dim, he heard the distant sound of an engine. Relief washed over him. Someone was coming. He shouted, though he knew it was futile against the engine's roar. He waved his arms, desperate to catch the attention of the approaching boat. The engine grew louder, and Mick felt a surge of energy. He climbed higher in the tree, making himself more visible. The boat appeared on the horizon, a small fishing vessel gliding through the water, oblivious to the chaos that had just unfolded. He shouted again, his voice hoarse but filled with urgency. The fishermen in the approaching boat spotted the flare just as it extinguished, a plume of smoke trailing behind it. They steered towards the mangroves, their faces filled with confusion and concern. Mick could hardly believe it. Help was coming. But the crocodile was still nearby, and Mick could see it lurking just below the surface, its eyes fixed on him like a predator sizing up its prey. He had to hold on, had to stay alive until help arrived. The tension in the air was thick, and every moment felt like an eternity. As the boat drew closer, the fisherman shouted, asking if anyone needed help. Mick waved frantically, his voice cracking as he called for them to hurry. Sensing the commotion, the crocodile began to swim closer, its powerful body slicing through the water with purpose. The fishermen finally spotted Mick in the tree, their eyes widening in shock. They quickly maneuvered their boat closer and threw him a rope. Mick grabbed it with all his strength, pulling himself back into the ship as the crocodile lunged once more, snapping its jaws just inches from the edge of the vessel. With a final burst of energy, Mick clambered aboard, the fishermen helping him to safety. They turned the boat around just as the crocodile resurfaced, its eyes glistening with hunger and frustration. Mick breathed heavily, the reality of the encounter hitting him like a wave. As they sped away from the mangroves, Mick looked back at where Jack had been taken. Guilt and sorrow washed over him. He had been unable to save his friend. The men in the boat reassured him that they would return to search for Jack, but Mick knew the odds were slim. The river had taken him, and the crocodile would not soon relinquish its prize. Days passed as search efforts continued, but Jack was never found. The incident became a somber tale whispered among local fishermen, a stark reminder of the dangers lurking in the shadows. Mick returned to his life, forever changed by the experience. The mangroves, once a place of adventure and camaraderie, became a haunting memory, a testament to the unpredictable nature of the world. In the end, Mick learned to respect the river and its inhabitants, understanding that the actual cost of fishing in those waters was often measured in more than just the size of the catch. The bond he shared with Jack would never be forgotten, a shadow that loomed over every fishing trip he would take in the years to come. It was the summer of 2014, on the eastern side of the Hawaiian island of Oahu, when some friends gathered for a long-awaited vacation. They chose Makai Cove, a scenic beach conducive to perfect waves. Between jagged cliffs and green vegetation, the cove lay embedded and offered the perfect retreat from the hustle and bustle of city life. Many visited and termed it a hidden gem, a junction of ocean and sky in a perfect blend of blue. Makai Cove had a rich history. It was an ancient site for Hawaiian rituals and thus considered a place sacred to the spirits of the ocean. The cove had long been a destination for surfers, but it was known for its unpredictable currents and occasional shark sightings. Local legends spoke of great tiger sharks patrolling the waters, drawn by thrashing fish and splashing surfers. Yet these tales couldn't diminish the allure of the waves. Among these friends was Emily Fernandez, an enchanted beginner surfer who was excited and a little trepidatious. She had always admired the ocean from the shore, but had yet to dare to venture far into its middle. Her friends, Gabriel Silva, a seasoned surfer, Sofia Oliveira with her infectious laughter, and Lucas Almeida, the ever-cautious planner, had promised to guide her through the day's adventure. Upon their arrival, the sun gleamed above, spilling its warmth onto the white sand. Waves crashed against the shore, filling the atmosphere with a symphony of nature that invited one to plunge in. They quickly set up their boards. Their vibrant colors contrasted sharply with the ocean's deep blue. Her heart raced excitedly as she watched her friends paddle into the ocean. She struggled to maintain her poise on the board as confidence waned with each wobble. That initial fear was still there, but the rush of riding her first wave called her forward. With Gabriel encouraging her, she pushed into the water, paddling hard to keep up. Unknown to the surfers, a hefty tiger shark was also drawn to that cove on the same day. The striped and potently built creature cruised just below the surface of the water. It felt the vibrations of the splashing water as it slid silently, its sharp senses alert to any sign of movement. While the friends surfed on waves, Emily drifted farther and farther from them. The strong tides were slowly pulling her away from their safety. She was riding one wave, feeling exuberant. But in that excitement, she did not think about how far she had gone. The atmosphere changed suddenly. The water darkened and a shadow loomed beneath the surface. The tiger shark had swum closer, interested in all the commotion. Still oblivious to the danger lurking beneath, Emily paddled on. The peaceful day was ruined in a split second. The shark reared upwards, its mighty jaws gaping wide as it leaped at Emily. The impact knocked her off her board, tumbling into the water. Panic gripped her as she felt a sharp pang in her leg. The shark bit her, and she could see the dark waters swirling crimson around her. Her friends turned around to find her struggling in the water because all of a sudden it had gone quiet from Emily's end. Gabriel's heart raced as he cried out to Sophia and Lucas to paddle fast, for they had to push hard at the waves with surging adrenaline, finally nearing Emily's visibly straining figure to keep her head above the water. As they drew closer, he saw the circling shark, its dorsal fin cutting menacingly through the water. Gabriel quickly paddled to the board and positioned it between Emily and the shark, while Sophia and Lucas helped her back onto their boards. They worked together with minds racing in fear and urgency. They paddled to shore together, with Emily clinging to a board while looking back to ensure the shark was not following them. The beach seemed so far away, and the strokes were heavier because of Emily's thumping leg. The group worked as a team, determined by the need to reach safety. Finally, they reached the shallow area where the water was calmer. Emily was pulled onto the sand, her leg bleeding but not her spirit. Gabriel quickly looked at the bite and began applying pressure to stop the bleeding. Sophia called out for help, her voice relatively steady despite all the tumult around them. Lucas, always prepared, had a first aid kit in his backpack. He hastened to retrieve it, fumbling with the contents while trying to maintain focus. The group made a protective barrier around Emily, their laughter now replaced by concerns. They worked to clean the wound, applying a bandage with hands shaking from adrenaline. Soon enough, minutes passed and a siren sounded, barely audible. Feelings of fear were then overcome by gratitude for her friends and Emily. They had managed to act fast, and she knew they would get her the help she needed. The friendship bond was apparent as they reassured her, their voices comforting from all the chaos. The paramedics checked Emily for injuries before they could prepare her for transport to the hospital upon arrival at the scene. Of course, all the eyes in the group met with concern. The day just took a turn none had expected. Managing a weak smile, Emily was grateful for the bravery of her friends. She felt a mix of fear and relief as they loaded her onto the stretcher. The doctors stitched the bite and ensured Emily was okay at the hospital. While it was tense, she didn't feel so alone with her friends there. They all just sat in the waiting room talking about stories to lighten the mood, laughing that echoed off the sterile walls. Days passed, and Emily slowly recovered. The experience made her look at surfing and the ocean in a very different light. Indeed, she had not lost her passion for the waves, but she knew how much respect they deserved. She had the same friends who stuck by her throughout her recovery period. That moment at Mackay Cove was not easily shaken from their memories, reminding them of the ocean's power and unpredictability. The moment Emily got injured, it would become a story they would tell, not just one of danger, but of the power of friendship and resilience. They had been in one of those terrifying moments together and were stronger for it. As she recovered, thoughts of returning to the water began to cross Emily's mind. The fear lingered, but so did the adrenaline rush. Her friends pressed on, for they knew her fear well. The group planned a small excursion into the waves, away from the crowded beaches, to rediscover the lost love for surfing. Finally, when they came back to the Mackay Cove, radiant rays of the sun shone and, upon hitting the water surface, lent it a golden hue. Waves crashed gently to the shore, beckoning them to resume the oceanic adventure. She stood at the edge of the water. Her heart was pounding from the mix of excitement and anxiety. With her friends beside her, she took a deep breath and paddled out into the water. It was both familiar and strange. Freedom washed over her as it must have all those years ago when she caught her first wave. Her fear of the past started to slip away, replaced by the exhilaration of the present. Emily's journey wasn't just about surfing, confronting her fears and embracing life's unpredictability. The beautiful yet deadly sea had taught her valuable lessons. Now, riding the waves with friends by her side, she realized that the continuation of her adventure was hers to shape, one wave at a time. The Red Sea sparkled in the unforgiving summer sun of 2008, its crystal waters beckoning citizens ranging from aquatic enthusiasts to nature lovers. The coral reefs just meters before the shoreline make Sharm el-Sheikh an Egyptian city, the incredible biodiversity planet Earth will likely experience. Home to thousands of fish species and crustaceans, it was home to many an underwater spy lens. Max Daniels was an experienced underwater photographer whose astounding photographs of marine life had decided to go on a solo dive to document the vibrant ecosystem of the reef. For years, Max honed the craft and developed the ability to see the gentle beauty under the water's surface. With his state-of-the-art equipment hanging on his back, he slipped into the embracing coolness of the sea, which consequently made the water immediately refreshing. The sun danced across the surface as he dove, outlining the figures of coral formations beneath. Schools of colorful fish fluttered in and out of the coral, creating an artistic display of living brushstrokes on canvas. He knew the balance of life in those waters was so delicate, despite everything around him being so beautiful, that he noted the dangers of pollution and climate change. He wanted to create stunning images and educate the public about this fragile underwater world. A particularly vibrant coral formation drew in Max as he maneuvered through the reef. The coral's reds, purples, yellows, and greens were terrific, and he quickly set up his camera for the scene. Slightly in the zone or lost in the moment, he dialed in settings on his focus for vibrant colors. In this moment of concentration, it was then that he had just placed his foot in a hole of a crevasse. The massive giant moray eel had been watching him unknowingly. With its powerful predatory prowess and typical misinterpreted aggressive behavior, especially towards divers, this enormous predator was an ambush specialist. As Max's hand drew nearer, the eel, with its long serpentine-like body coiled in a dark crevice, reacted to that surge of instinctive hunger in a flash. It locked down on Max's wrist as he shot out of the aperture. The attack had been sudden and caused a jolt of pain to shoot through Max. He automatically snapped back, but the eel's grip was firm. Panic started to surge within him when he realized that he had a severe problem. With the water turning murky around him from all the thrashing, he tried his best to remain calm while his heart raced. His oxygen supply was dying, and he desperately really needed to think clearly. He remembered now the diving knife strapped against his leg, a thing he had hoped never to use. He reached for it now, fingers fumbling in the water, adrenaline pumping in his blood. By now, the eel was coiled around his body, the pressure building up. He knew too well that struggling greatly would only make things worse. Max breathed a steadying breath and pointed the blade at the eel's head. He knew what to do from books. The main thing was to desist from panic and act firmly. He stabbed forward, and the eel, shocked by the unexpected aggression, opened its hold on him. Pulling back, Max now had to face an angry and on the defensive eel. The underwater environment felt dreamlike. Everything slowed to nearly a stop as he faced the giant eel. More confused than aggressive, the eel swam its way. He danced his body slightly with deft speed, prepared to push the monster away should it try to continue its assault. Each motion seemed a slow dance to danger, the deep blue water around him. His head was spinning, for he had to reach the surface. The coral reef, which was such a beautiful shelter until moments ago, was confusing now, an area filled with potential dangers. He turned and thrust upwards, swimming toward the light as strongly as he could. Realizing the prey was running away, the eel retook a lunge, with all its jaws snapping just inches from his leg. Max finally broke through the surface, gulping the air, the sun's heat welcoming him back to safety. But he knew he couldn't afford to ease back. He swam away from the reef, panting hard and judging his arm. It hurt. The bite was painful but shallow enough. He would survive this. He returned to the boat, took out his first aid kit, and tended his wounds before paddling to the shore. He would carry the experience with him all his life. Finally, as the sun began to set, orange and pink, Max sank into thought concerning the day and all that had occurred. He had realized the ocean's danger, but it lay like a sleeping tiger within the cradle of its remarkable beauty and charisma. This humbled him and taught him the importance of respect for all aspects of the ocean. The next day, unbroken in spirit and with his arm bandaged, Max returned to the reef. This time, however, he approached much more cautiously, his camera poised to capture the beauty of the coral and the stories of survival within. It was an ambush set by the giant moray eel and more fabulous inspiration for a complex life under the sea. As he dived back into the water, the sun filtered through the waves and he felt a rekindled sense of purpose. With each click of the camera, he hoped he could express the beauty of the reef and the importance of protecting such sensitive ecosystems. Ultimately, Max Daniels triumphed to be more than a photographer, now the protector of the sea, upon discovering that even the most beautiful places have unexpected dangers.